Hi guys. I'm sorry I cannot be there for the meeting. But I just wanted to share with you. I was actually asked to by Mrs. Winkler, and she asked me to reflect upon the loss associated with adoption. As far as my own life, I experienced great loss when I was put into foster care because the foster home that I was in was not an environment where I was provided with somebody to bond to. That means from ages 0 to 4, I didn't bond with anyone. I didn't have anybody that was secure, that loved me, that cared for me emotionally. My physical needs were met, but my emotional needs were not met. And so that in time throughout the years has made it difficult for me, and I truly believe that that loss was huge in my life. Um, I guess ways that I have learned to overcome it was through great struggle. Really was is the best way to put it. It wasn't one day the switch flipped and I suddenly had this huge loss that I had had for many years um, fulfilled. It wasn't like that for me. It took a very long time and many years and many tears and many wrong paths that I went down. And I don't say this to scare you as adoptive parents or future adopting parents. I say this just to give you a perspective that if your foster child or adoptive child um, seems to be going down these various paths that are not right, it may be because they have experienced great loss. And um, the loss for me of not having somebody to bond to and not having somebody who truly loved me really damaged me, like I said before, because I was not used to physical touch. I was not used to the fact that crying was okay. I was not used to telling my mom and dad that I love them. I was not used to receiving love. I spent many years when I was first adopted wishing in my mind and mentally not letting myself join the family because I wanted to go back to my birth mom. And so um, it was a great loss for me, and it was something that I definitely struggled with, but I would say confidently that it is something that I have overcome. But not without the grace of God for sure. Um, One really key thing that my parents did is they continued to point me to Jesus and to help me to understand that the great loss that I had experienced was real and that it wasn't something to be ignored, but it wasn't something that had to rule me for my whole life. It was something that I could heal from, and it was something that I could turn around to use to minister to people who have experienced loss, whether that was loss of a loved one or whatever. So that was a very important thing that my parents did. And I look back now at the great struggle that we all went through with me, and I honestly don't know how they did it. Um, I love them very much, and sorry, I just am very grateful that, sorry, that they took the time to help me heal. And that they acknowledged that my loss was real. Um, but that Jesus was greater, and that was huge. It's absolutely huge. And I know it may seem like a very cliche answer, but I had to see in my own life that Jesus was real in practical ways. I had to understand that physical touch was something that was good, and it was something that meant that I was bonded and had a healthy relationship with my parents. And I had to understand that saying I love you to my mom was something that was important to her. And there were just many practical ways that they had to teach me to accept love and to, in turn, accept Jesus' love, because he was the only one who was able to fill that hole, the loss of my birth mom and the loss of not being loved in the first few years. I will never forget, my dad always tells me that when one of the first nights that I spent with them in Buda, Texas, actually, my dad held me on his stomach and I just cried and cried and cried and screamed and cried and cried. And I resisted him and I resisted him and I finally fell asleep. I was laying on his stomach, just exhausted from screaming and resisting. And I would say that's a pretty good picture of how I was for many years. I was very resistant to love because I didn't know how to love. But my parents patiently and faithfully kept showing me how to love and how to heal from the great loss that I experienced in the first 4 years of my life. So I guess what I would say to you as foster and adoptive parents is don't give up. Continue to love your child, which I know you're doing, but take the time to tell them that their loss is real and that it's something that you're not going to ignore, but it's not something that they need to focus their entire life on, and that there are healthy and appropriate ways to mourn the loss and to acknowledge it, but yet to move on and maybe in turn use their testimony of how they overcame their loss to encourage others. So that's kind of all I have to say, and I'm very grateful that you have asked me to speak. I'm sorry it's kind of short, but I just wanted to say things that were from my heart, and I love you very much, Mom and Dad.